What if everything you were told about where you came from was a lie? For centuries, one story shaped the soul of a nation. It was carved into ancient palm leaves, preserved in stone, and passed down through temple chants like a sacred flame. According to the Mahavamsa, the Sinhalese people are descendants of Prince Vijaya, who sailed from Bengal and landed on the island in 543 BCE. This was not just a legend, it was the national origin myth, a sacred beginning every child was taught, a story every monument whispered. But in 2025, scientists cracked open the genome, and that sacred story began to collapse. A full whole genome sequencing study, the most advanced to date, revealed something no one expected. The majority of Sinhalese DNA, nearly 70%, does not trace back to Bengal. Instead, it connects deeply to South Indian Dravidian populations, especially the Paramalai Kalas of Tamil Nadu. That finding did not just bend the national narrative, it broke it. Even more striking was the discovery of haplogroups M and U present in Sinhalese mitochondrial DNA. These maternal lineages, passed unchanged from mother to daughter for tens of thousands of years, were not found in the supposed North Indian ancestors. They matched South Indian tribal populations, some with roots going back well before 2000 BCE. Then came the most uncomfortable revelation. The genetic overlap between Sinhalese and Sri Lankan Tamils was not slight, it was overwhelming, 55.2%. That is not migration, that is kinship. Biologically, the two groups, long divided by language, religion, and civil war, are closer to each other than to their cultural cousins across the sea. The data revealed a truth few dared to accept. These were not two peoples, they were one. This is not the tale sung by kings or etched into national identity. This is a silent history written in blood. And it is only now being heard. So, if Vijaya did not carry the origin of a people across the waters from Bengal, then where and when did the island's true genetic story begin? What if the island's oldest children were never part of the myth at all, because they were too ancient to fit the script? Where and when did the island's true genetic story begin? Not in the courts of kings, not in the verses of chronicles, but deep in the caves, under thick forest canopy, in the forgotten veins of a people older than memory itself. They are called the Vedda, the last indigenous hunter-gatherers of Sri Lanka. Marginalized, almost invisible, left outside every national narrative. Because they did not arrive, they were already here. In 2024, a breakthrough whole genome sequencing study changed everything. Scientists found that Vedda DNA carries one of the oldest surviving genetic signatures in South Asia, known as the AASI, Ancestral South Indian. A branch so ancient it stretches back over 40,000 years, long before cities, kingdoms, or language. The story got deeper. In the Central Highlands, archaeologists unearthed a skeleton, Balangoda Man, dated to 38,000 BCE. The bone structure revealed primitive brow ridges, wide nasal apertures, and shorter limbs, archaic features that mirror early Homo sapiens. And when geneticists compared the ancient remains to modern DNA, they found continuity with the Vedda people, a living echo of prehistoric Sri Lanka. But here is where the mystery sharpened. Despite their isolation, Vedda mitochondrial DNA clustered closer to the Sinhalese and Sri Lankan Tamils than to Indian Tamils. It meant only one thing: prehistoric fusion. Long before invaders or traders, these ancient islanders had already begun blending with newcomers. And the newcomers became the people we now call natives. Their genomes show intense genetic drift, a sign of small, isolated populations. They carry unique mutations lost in others, like time capsules preserved in silence. Their diversity is lower, but their ancestral signal is stronger. Their bodies are maps untouched by the rewriting of history. But for all the secrets held in their bones, the greatest contradiction was not in their DNA, it was in their tongues. If your DNA spoke Dravidian, why does your language whisper Sanskrit? The greatest contradiction was not in their DNA, it was in their tongues. Because in the heart of a population genetically rooted in the Dravidian South, the spoken word belongs to the Indo-European North. Sinhala, the language of the Sinhalese, does not match their genome. It sings in Sanskritic tones. But their blood tells a different story. This is not just odd. It is a paradox that shakes the foundations of cultural identity. According to recent genome-wide studies, Sinhalese people share over 65% of their ancestry with South Indian Dravidian populations, particularly the Tamil-speaking Paramalai Kalas. And yet they speak a language that traces back to the Aryan steppe migrations, a linguistic family born thousands of kilometers away. Two main theories attempt to explain this split. The first, the language elite hypothesis, suggests that a small Indo-Aryan group arrived, possibly with political or religious power, and imposed their language, even though their genetic footprint barely survived. Words stayed, blood did not. The second, more nuanced, is the admixture hypothesis. By the time these Aryan speakers reached the island, they had already interbred with Dravidian communities. They did not conquer with armies. They arrived already hybrid. Their language, like their identity, was never pure to begin with. Ancient inscriptions support this. The earliest Sinhala texts, dating back over 2,000 years, contain Dravidian loanwords embedded deep within the undeniable code switching of a blended culture. This is not unique to Sri Lanka. We have seen it before. Hungarians with Uralic tongues but Indo-European DNA, Quechua-speaking tribes in Peru, whose genes trace back to entirely different linguistic roots. In every case, language outlives blood. Because language is not just communication, it is a conqueror. It survives war, reshapes memory, and rewrites who we think we are. But just when we think we have understood the tug-of-war between the Dravidian genome and Aryan grammar, another bloodline emerges, not from the north, nor from the forests, but from the sea. What if an entire community's origin story sailed in from the wrong sea? Another bloodline emerges, not from the north, nor from the forests, but from the sea. They were merchants, pilgrims, storytellers, arriving in wooden ships between the 7th and 15th centuries, their sails chasing the winds of trade and faith. These men came from Arabia, from Yemen, Oman, and the Persian Gulf, or so the story goes. They are known as the Sri Lankan Moors, a Muslim community long believed to be the descendants of Arab traders who planted roots, spread Islam, and left behind a foreign legacy in a local land. But in 2025, that legacy was tested, not by politics, not by theology, but by chromosomes. When researchers conducted a high-resolution X-chromosome sequencing study, they found something stunning. The Moors' genetic profile did not match Arabian populations at all. Instead, it aligned strikingly with Sri Lankan Tamils and Sinhalese. The contradiction did not stop there. The study revealed a sex-biased ancestry pattern, a genetic signature found across many trading ports of the Indian Ocean. Arab merchantmen may have arrived, but the women, they were local, Sri Lankan, Dravidian, indigenous. And when these men left or assimilated, the maternal line remained. More mitochondrial DNA, passed from mother to child, is entirely South Asian. The haplogroups are identical to those found in Sinhalese and Tamil populations, rooted deeply in the island soil. There is no trace of Arabian maternal ancestry, not even a whisper, and yet for centuries the Moors have preserved Arabic customs, Quranic literacy, Islamic jurisprudence, and genealogical tales of noble desert descent. They buried their dead facing Mecca, they recited names that echoed Medina, but their genes never left Sri Lanka. This is the contradiction. A community that speaks of Mecca, but bleeds like Colombo. Because if the island's Muslims did not come from Arabia, then who really crossed the seas? And who simply changed their skin? What if the most visibly different community had the deepest local ties? Then who really crossed the seas? And who simply changed their skin? For centuries, one group stood out. Lighter skin, foreign names, European traditions wrapped in tropical heat, the Burghers. To many Sri Lankans, they seemed like the ultimate outsiders, descendants of Portuguese and Dutch colonizers who arrived in waves from the early 15th to 17th centuries, traders, missionaries, soldiers, some fleeing empires, some building them. But behind their Dutch surnames and Portuguese Catholic relics, something unexpected remained buried. Not in archives, but in their blood. When geneticists began sequencing Burgher DNA, the results were startling. Yes, they carried distinctive European Y-DNA lineages, like RI1b, common across Western Europe. But that was not the whole story. Up to 60% of their autosomal DNA matched the Sinhalese gene pool. This was not foreign ancestry layered on top. It was a hybrid identity down to the chromosome. The data told the story of generations of intermarriage, of colonial men taking local wives, raising children between worlds, neither fully European nor entirely native, a biological bridge between empire and island. And while their surnames echoed Dutch legal codes and Portuguese baptisms, their mitochondrial DNA passed through maternal lines is distinctly South Asian. the blood of local women carried forward through each colonial generation. Even today, the burgher identity holds tension, caught between Western aesthetics and island belonging. They cook lampreys and speak English, but their faces, their genes, their bones carry Sri Lanka's oldest whispers. Because colonialism did not erase identity, it absorbed it. But just when we think we have reached the far edge of Sri Lanka's genetic story, when the last colonial ship has docked, something stranger appears on the genomic map, a signal from even farther away. But even deeper than colonial scars lie echoes from lands far beyond the subcontinent. A whisper from the Black Sea made it into Sri Lankan blood. How? Even deeper than colonial scars lie echoes from lands far beyond the subcontinent. In the middle of the Indian Ocean, thousands of miles from Europe's heart, a genetic ghost surfaced, a whisper from the Black Sea, not in passing sailors or modern migrants, but buried deep in the oldest bones of the island. In 2025, genome researchers sequencing the Vedda and Sinhalese populations discovered something no one expected: a rare maternal haplogroup, mitochondrial DNA U7, found in the Caucasus, Iran, and the Black Sea basin. A lineage that should not be here, but it is. How did a Eurasian signal, born between 4,000 and 7,000 years ago, end up pulsing through the blood of islanders? One theory points to the Bronze Age maritime networks. Long before empire, long before trade routes had names, seafarers from West Asia, maybe even early Indo-European steppe groups, reached the southern coasts of India and beyond. Their bloodline, like cargo, traveled silently, and U7 was not alone. Researchers also identified East and Southeast Asian markers, the AFB1B3 immunoglobulin variant, linked to populations in southern China, and hemoglobin E, found widely across mainland Southeast Asia. These are not recent arrivals, they are ancient traces, carried by waves of merchants, explorers, or refugees, centuries before Columbus ever left Europe. These markers are not minor. In some Sinhalese and Vedda populations, they appear in up to 40% of sample genomes. That is not a ripple. That is a flood. It gets more tangled. These very same Eurasian signatures appear in the Maratha populations of Western India, linking Sri Lanka's ancient peoples to the linguistic and genetic roots of Indo-European ancestry, but through unexpected maritime branches, not northern invasions. So now we know the blood of Sri Lanka does not just remember Lanka, it remembers Persia, China, Greece, the steppe, because if these lineages made it across oceans in ancient centuries, if bloodlines from China, Europe, and Persia arrived, what else crossed these seas? When every boundary falls, what does identity even mean? If bloodlines from China, Europe, and Persia arrived, what else crossed these seas? Now imagine this: centuries of migrations, invasions, and marriages, weaving a genetic tapestry so tight it dissolves borders. A tapestry where the Sinhalese, Sri Lankan Tamils, and Moors do not stand apart but blend into one. In 2025, advanced allele frequency and X-chromosome STR studies revealed a stunning truth. These three ethnic groups cluster almost identically in genomic space. Their DNA does not form separate islands, it flows as one. Even markers on the X chromosome, inherited largely through maternal lines, refuse to acknowledge distinctions. The markers are shared, overlapping, undivided. This is not theoretical. It is visible in the genetic line of Sri Lanka's profile. The colors all fuse along one gradient, and that gradient stretches neither north nor south, but across caste, creed, and conflict. It is geometry that history never acknowledged. Consider the ANI dough neckline, the spectrum drawn from the Indus periphery of Bronze Age South Asia to its deep ancestral hunter-gatherer roots. Sri Lanka's communities align not in distinct bands, but within that same shimmering band, anchored somewhere in between. They share ancestry with South India's Dravidian groups, with West Eurasian waves, even with Southeast Asian pulses. So what happens when cultural divisions, language wars, and religious conflict meet this undeniable fact? We are genetically the same. When every boundary falls, what becomes of identity? What stories remain? If identity was always shared, why did we forget? What we remember may divide us, but what we inherit never lies. Because forgetting is easy, especially when power depends on remembering wrong. In temples, scrolls, and schoolbooks, identity was taught as a clean tale. The Mahavamsa spoke of noble origins, a prince, a voyage, a destiny, carved from 543 BCE. Colonial writers reinforced it. drawing hard lines between Tamil, Sinhalese, Moor, between native and outsider, between past and present, a straight story with clean names and heroic bloodlines. But the body tells another tale. In 2025, whole genome reconstructions, including mitochondrial DNA and Y chromosome analyses, painted a story with no straight lines, just overlapping waves, each migration already mixed, each settlement already fused. The Sinhalese genome carried threads from South Indian tribal groups, from ancient Southeast Asian sailors, even from Bronze Age steppe migrations and Tamil DNA, just as diverse. No one came pure, no one came first, they all came entangled. Memory, passed down through stories and flags and fear, fractured these truths. It split a shared history into rival claims. But mitochondrial DNA, passed silently from mother to child, refused to lie. It held the imprints of forgotten grandmothers, of island women who welcomed invaders and neighbors alike. And the Y-DNA markers, scrolled through paternal bloodlines, did not support the noble myths either. They told of farmers, soldiers, and sailors, not kings. They told of blended legacies, not divine descent. So what happens when the genome contradicts the tale? When science whispers that our enemy might be our cousin? When the truth in our blood outlives the lies in our books? Because in every village, every surname, every sacred tradition, there is a fusion, a collision of genes. Memory splits us, but mitochondria remembers. And still, one question remained unanswered. Who was the first? Before kings, chronicles, or conquerors, there was someone else. Long before kingdoms rose, or scribes chronicled destiny, long before the Mahavamsa's Prince Vijaya or colonial maps, someone walked these mountains in silence. Meet Balangoda man. A human form unearthed in Sri Lanka's central highlands, dating back 38,000 years. His skull speaks in the language of time. Heavy brow ridges, cheekbones shaped by ancient winds. The fossil record does not link him to modern populations. It looks at him and sees a cradle, not a crossroads. His bones tell us that Sri Lanka was not just a final stop for arrivals, it might have been home first, home in the Ice Age. And this is not legend. Deep in the bloodlines of the Vedda people, their mitochondrial DNA haplogroups, inherited from mother to child over millennia, mirror that ancient signature. There is no break. There is no starting line. There is a thread, a golden, invisible thread that weaves through 38,000 years into today. Imagine that, an unbroken chain of flesh and bone, a living echo of a face we will never see. And yet we live divided. We trace histories backward, searching for breadcrumbed origins. But here, on this island, the origin hides in plain sight. It is in us. No politics, no temples can touch this. It predates it all. So what happens when the deepest identity is not found in conquest, religion, or language, but in the continuity of life itself? When the oldest face belongs not to the hero or king, but to the person who walked here first? If Sri Lanka's true inheritance is not separation but unbroken resilience, then what else is buried in our blood, waiting to reawaken? And if this island carries secrets 40,000 years old, what will the next genome reveal?